Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, post-match. Jannik Sinner versus Francisco Cerundolo, Rome 2025, round 4. If you're not here for spoilers, click off the video. Sinner wins it, 7-6, 6-3 to advance to the Rome quarterfinals. Sinner will be thrilled with that, and he will be thrilled with his level. The fact that he comes away victorious against a guy in Francisco Cerundolo, arguably top 10er on clay. Decent argument for that. And in just his third match back from the 3-month suspension, he's able to come away with the victory in straight sets. That in itself is mightily impressive. You knew that this was going to be hard for Sinner in particular ways, and it was never a given how he was going to handle this stuff, but there were going to be big points, and there certainly were big points, and I think the nerve management, the play under pressure, that's one thing that you would have worried about the suspension sort of disrupting that air of invincibility on big points that Sinner had established for himself throughout all of 2024 and the Australian Open to start 2025. You wonder, like, does that clutchness, is that going to go away? Now, on one hand, Jannik has had trouble closing out a couple of his matches already here in Rome. The thing is, the lead at those junctures were so significant. In this case against Cerundolo, it was 5-1 in the second set that it didn't ultimately matter. When you look at it, Sinner plays a 4-5 service game in the first set. He's 2 points away from losing the set on 3 separate occasions. And he comes through with some quality ball to get through those points. Did get some ground stroke errors out of Cerundolo there. They play a tiebreak. Jannik is squeaky clean in the tiebreak, doesn't put a foot wrong. We'll get into that in more detail. And then after blowing the 5-1, getting to 5-3, that service game gets tight on Sinner, and he sees that one through. So all in all, he was the more clutch player, despite the fact that Cerundolo has been not only playing tournaments week in, week out for the last couple months, also winning a lot of matches. And you also knew that this was going to get physical for Sinner. And now 3 matches in, how is he going to hold up to that match intensity when, okay, yes, he's been training hard, working out, but you don't feel that adrenaline, and you can't really simulate it. Everybody says that. The serves in this match were all coming back, right? Like, they weren't playing a lot of quick points, and Sinner was being dictated to by one of the biggest forehands out there. Like, he is not operating in this match oftentimes from a stationary position. He is going to get pushed around by Cerundolo, who likes some of these extended points, but not as much as Sinner, as we'll get to. So I think also physically, just the way Jannik was able to trust his defense and play a physical brand of tennis, point in, point out, was a huge positive here. Now, recovering and playing through the week is a separate challenge, and that might be even the harder part for Sinner. It does seem like he's dealing with blisters on his feet, so we'll track that as the week goes on. Is the long-term physicality going to be an issue? Maybe, but in this match, it was really, really good. As far as what decided this match, this was a competitive encounter, and it wasn't the most tactical match in the world, but the quality was really good for portions of it. There were about 8 minutes of play where Cerundolo was awful, and that made the difference. You look at the tiebreak, I've got 6 unforced errors by Cerundolo in the tiebreak, which he lost 7-2. Like, the one point where Jannik actually took it out of Cerundolo's hands was a nice serve plus forehand drop shot that Jannik came up with. But other than that, Cerundolo basically hit himself straight out of that situation, spreading the wealth, I might add, between the forehand and the backhand. He just got really sloppy in that breaker when it mattered. And then in the second set at 2-1, he was actually looking to be in good shape in this game. But ultimately, this game goes to deuce, and Cerundolo missed 4 first balls, like 4+1 balls, to send this game to deuce. meaning Sinner got to deuce in this Cerundolo service game just by making returns, was not asked to do anything else. And none of the returns were particularly stifling or offensive. I mean, some of them were some solid returns, but not forcing returns, I wouldn't say. It was almost, by the way, a fifth fourth ball miss for Cerundolo on the first break point, but he got a little net cord winner. And then Sinner did play some great defense as that game progressed. That extended points into 2 additional attacking forehand unforced errors by Cerundolo. But boy, I mean, he really muddied up the stat sheet in that particular game. So this is part of why Sinner is the better player. I know it's not the sexiest stuff to talk about, but a massive reason why Sinner is the better player in this particular matchup is that his level stays the same throughout matches. And Cerundolo, it can really be a roller coaster sometimes, especially because he's a very forehand reliant player. He loves to take his chances off of that wing. And when it goes in, it's as good as it gets. And it's often unplayable the way he can dictate from the back of the court with his forehand. But it's less reliable than Sinner's forehand, a whole lot less reliable. And you see that fleshed out at the end of the match in terms of the unforced error count off of the forehand wing in particular. I think Sinner's footwork is sharper, generally speaking, and I think his focus is better, generally speaking, and I think he is willing to, take on less risk on a shot-by-shot basis, and all of those things kind of contribute to the fact that he's never really going to have those awful games or play these awful tie breaks where he's not competitive. And that happened to Cerundolo a couple of times in this match, which cost him. Rally length, I want to get into. Best part of Cerundolo's game was his serve +1. I want to give Francisco a lot of credit here. I've talked about him over the years, and I felt like the serve was holding him back big time, especially because he's got that gem of a forehand. If he could only set it up more often with strong first serves, he'd be in business. And he has made gains on that delivery. And I found that he was having the majority of his success in this match, not by hitting unreturnables necessarily, but by basically taking full control on the +1 forehands. Jannik was often unable to kind of keep it out of trouble and keep that +1 forehand quiet. Cerundolo actually won more rallies under 5 in this match, 45-41. 45-41. However, a lot of points got extended in this match, as I mentioned earlier. In fact, actually, if you add it up, I think there were more, 53. Yeah, it's very close. There were basically just as many 5+ rallies as there were 0-4 rallies, which is very, very rare. But when points were extended, that's where Sinner pulled away. Jannik won 53 points and Cerundolo won 38 points in the 5+ category. And this came down to, I think, a lot of unflashy stuff that Jannik did really well. His rally depth was awesome. So while the +1 forehand for Cerundolo had a massive impact, once they got into the rallies, Jannik does such a good job of keeping the ball out of the middle that it was a lot harder for Cerundolo to impose himself with that forehand. Sinner was playing, very disciplined defense. I mentioned in that 2-1 game, there were a couple of, crucial defensive digs that Jannik came up with, just forcing Cerundolo to play an extra ball and getting errors. And Cerundolo, when it comes to his attack, sometimes it can feel like it gets a little bit lower percentage against a great defender because he doesn't finish at the net. More on that in a moment. But also, I think from a rally pattern standpoint, Sinner was really diligent about making Cerundolo just hit a ton of backhands. It ended up being statistically about 50-50 for Cerundolo, forehands and backhands, but he's such a forehand-reliant player, that is likely a win for Jannik. And Sinner was like 80% backhands cross-court, he was just going to stay in that pattern. Cerundolo's backhand down the line was not clicking, so it was really difficult for Cerundolo to get out of that pattern once he was in it. And it was really hard for him to find runaround forehands, and sometimes it's a huge danger to look at a player like Cerundolo and just try to pepper the backhand wing, because the last thing you want to do is sort of allow Cerundolo to cheat over to his left and find forehands. Sinner's backhand cross court is so big. The average speeds are consistently so high. The location of it is consistently so good. The quality doesn't drop enough in order to give Cerundolo opportunities really to run around. So it felt like that in that backhand and backhand exchange, Cerundolo was kind of in jail from that position, and Sinner could just use the superior patience and rally tolerance to his advantage once they got into that thing. Last thing, Cerundolo's volleys versus Sinner's, really big skill gap. Maybe one of the biggest skill gaps in this match. And Cerundolo was 9 for 17 at the net. There were a couple of volleys that he missed early on, and I'm like, yikes. Like, it's as bad as it gets as far as top 20 players, or top 50 players for that matter, in my opinion, Cerundolo's volleys. To the point where I went and I looked at his doubles record. I'm like, all right, so how does Cerundolo do in doubles? He is, for his career, 10 wins, 43 losses. I don't know. Does that always mean anything, or is that always like a great indication? No, but I'm just letting you know I was watching this match and it became a curiosity of mine, especially because the way Sinner was hitting some of these passing shots hard directly at Cerundolo, kind of taking away the option to drop volley. Like, if the ball's coming in hard, you kind of have to stick it. And there were a couple of chances that Cerundolo had to hit like a just good hard stick volley, and it didn't look like he had any confidence taking on the pace coming in from Sinner. But the other implication here is that Sinner could be very liberal with his drop shot. And Jannik has worked hard on the forehand drop shot over the course of the last 2 years. It was mostly really good in this match. It did have its shaky moments, but it was mostly really good. You also felt that it didn't need to be a winner. It didn't need to be perfect because you were dragging Cerundolo up. And that was a positive thing for Jannik. On the margins, that's where kind of Sinner pulls away, because the meat and potatoes of the match is very competitive with these two. Like, they both are impeccable ball strikers and good movers from the back of the court. And when they get into those lateral exchanges off the ground, it's going to be very competitive. And it was. But Jannik, too tough, too focused, too consistent, and a little bit better when the sort of uncomfortable parts of the court for Cerundolo came into play. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.